We have now to conclude the formal proceedings of the day. Willie Janeway, who's our quite new executive director of the Adirondack Council, will say something about the connection between environmental protection and economic sustainability.
Thank you to Team Explorer and all of the incredible panelists and all of you dedicated participants. You're an extraordinary group. You're still here at this hour. It's actually fairly typical, though, of those of us here in the Adirondack.
The bar's not open yet. That's
right. As Jim said, I'm standing between you and the bar, so what I've been asked to talk about is looking at what we've been talking about today from a slightly different perspective. Well, the idea of the triple victory has been mentioned earlier. Most of what we've been talking about has been focused on the environmental protection and the needs for that, as was mentioned. We're talking to the choir here, we get that. But there's another reason to make that a priority. For the last 6 years as regional director for DEC in the Hudson Valley and the Catskills, remember that other forest preserve, I had the opportunity to help advance a few different governors' agenda in that area, including Andrew Cuomo. And part of his agenda and charge for us in the Hudson Valley was to protect the environmental resources, not just to protect the environmental resources, but because that's a key element of the economic strategy of a sustainable future for the Hudson Valley and the Catskills. And I would suggest that can also be applied up here. In the Hudson Valley, we convene stakeholders without changing regulations to look at seeker, to look at the permitting process that we had at the department. We had ground rules. Let's come up with ways of working changes that don't require legislative changes, that are going to equalize or advance improved environmental protection, that are going to maintain or improve citizen participation opportunities, and that are going to make permitting more predictable and more timely. We didn't know at the time that we launched that over the next few years we would lose 24% of our staff. But thanks to an incredible team of people that we had there at the agency and outside helping us, we came up with changes that we were able to implement that improved the environmental protection on permits. We brought in 2 appropriate permits, issues like climate change, sea level rise. We improved the water quality protection in areas where we had impaired water bodies. We raised the standard. At the same time, we also sped up the timeliness with which we were able to get permits out the door and improve the predictability. We went from having barely 2/3 of the permits at DEC in the Hudson Valley and the Catskills being issued on time under the Uniform Procedures Act. Starting out there, we didn't change that, improved the permits, and we got to less than 15% of the permits not meeting the timeliness standards for unique regions. So we had a 20+% increase in the timeliness of the permits while also making them more environmental. And we did that during a time when the number of permits that we were processing and looking at went from 1,300 permits in a year to over 1,900 permits a year. It can be done. It is hard as heck. You've got to get folks together, but one of the things I noticed being back here in the Adirondacks is the willingness for folks across the aisle to roll up their sleeves, get together. A lot of people, more than I can possibly name and recognize, really are to be applauded for working together and changing the tenor of the conversation here in the Adirondacks. That creates an opportunity for us to work traditional across the aisle, identify things. There probably are things that require legislative change, but if we can work together and come up with a common agenda that works for most of the people most of the time, then we can probably work in the political calculus to actually advance that. And not only will that be good for environmental protection, that'll be good for the economy of the Adirondacks. Why is it good for the economy of the Adirondacks? The biggest thing going in the Adirondacks is ecotourism. And when you look at different studies about the economic benefits of environmental protection, the economic benefits of wilderness, ecotourism rises to the top. And just to steal some of the Park Agency's August presentation from Dan Kelleher's information, he was looking at visitor spending of $1.1 billion in the park, 20,000 tourism jobs. Essex County, 37% of the labor income being tourism, ecotourism related. Hamilton County up at 47%. The outdoor activities were among the things that were the highest of interest to people in terms of coming to the Adirondacks. The non-motorized activities, I have to slip this in, were the most popular of the activities that were driving people to come here. Yes, 10 million people a year coming to the Adirondack Park. Looking at strengthening the economy going forward, I would suggest we could be looking at ways to improve and expand that number, couple it with improved management so we actually have less concerns about environmental resources. The visitor spending isn't just the hiker, it's also the person buying the weekend home, but it's also the businesses that get attracted to this quality of life to be located in here. When I was working in the Albany area, when I left the Adirondacks in 1994 and 95, we had a big wetland complex in the Albany Pine Bush that a developer was looking at, and they were looking at a site in Vermont. And the state of New York said, we can bend the rules on the wetlands and help you get into this site, even though there's some rare species issues. We found out later they were competing with a site in Vermont, where they were told, here are the rules, and you can't go there, but you can go over here. They chose Vermont over New York because their employees wanted to be in an area where there was going to be that level of environmental protection. We can think that giving someone a little bit of elbow room will help them, but it can actually backfire and turn around on us and work the other way. Ecotourism is probably the biggest element of the economic benefit of doing the environmental protection, of dealing with the stormwater, the pollution that Peter was talking about. It's not development, it's pollution. That was excellent. In terms of looking at the conservation design, it helps to protect the wild character and the environmental quality of what we have here. That drives our ecotourism. Economists will often talk about the tragedy of the commons, and it's a little scary talking to a group where I have a former environmental studies professor in the room, but my economics professor, thankfully, is not here. And when you have a common held asset in our marketplace system that we have, which is the best system in the world to motivate people, the incentive is not necessarily for the individual investor to do the right thing for the whole. And so the challenge for us here as economists, as environmentalists, is to look at how to internalize those externalities and make sure that we don't experience the tragedy of the commons, the wild open space character of the Adirondack Park, because that's what really fuels a sustainable economic future for us. Vibrant communities, jobs, schools, health, those things that are as much a part of the Adirondack Park as the wilderness areas. Some other studies that are out there that I will just quickly reference, Trust for Public Land did a great economic benefit of parks and open space. I'm not going to take the time to quote from that, but there's good data out there, including right in Vermont, with higher real property values closer to wilderness areas within the Green Mountain Wild Forest, higher values than you have in the non-wilderness areas of the Green Mountain National Forest. And as you move a quarter mile, a half a mile away from the wilderness, the real property values go down. There's good quantified data on that. We also should not ignore ecosystem services, ecosystem benefits. The clean water, the clean air, flood protection issues is key here in many Adirondack communities. The wildlife, the hunting, the fishing, the trapping, the economic impact of those recreational areas. On Friday night last week, I drove down to Utica and spoke with the New York State Conservation Council, and I heard when I got there that they had a bit of a debate like, why are we letting Willie in the room? He's an environmentalist, he's a tree hugger. Yes, I'm a tree hugger. And they said, we need to have open communication. If the sportsmen and the environmentalists aren't in the same room working together, we're splitting up into too many groups and we're diluting our potential political power. Yes, we'll take political capital to make the change we're talking about today. So I feel it was worth traveling down there, talking with them for even just a few minutes about some of the areas we have agreement on. Because while I may disagree with them on certain land classifications, there's dozens of other things that I suspect most of us and most of the sportsmen and sportswomen, trappers and hunters do agree on. And it's important that we expand the room and get more people into it if we want to be successful. Thanks for letting me go on that tangent. The economic benefits of ecotourism, property values, ecosystem services. I also want to mention just public health, the emotional, the stuff that's really hard to quantify, the stuff that the economic training, I mean, says, you can't really get at that. It's really hard to figure out the willingness to pay and how much people are willing to pay. But that can't be an excuse not to consider that and to look at that. There was a evaluation report done. Open Space Institute took the lead, and down in the Catskills, another forest preserve. Recently, Dan Gibson wrote about it not too long ago in the Almanac or the Explorer. I know it showed up in one of those. Dick can tell me which one. But he looked at what was done down there and the incredible economic dollars from both the public and private land conservation in the Catskill region. 1.7 million visitors, $46.2 million in terms of economic impact, nearly 1,000 jobs. And the best part was the quote from Alan White, the head of the Catskill Center for Research and Development, quote, "That's without trying." When you think about how we should be promoting and managing these lands compared to what we're doing now, it's somewhat embarrassing. And when you look at the economic costs of environmental protection, there are studies out there. Utah State University is one of the ones that gets cited more often, looking at the costs of wilderness and maintaining and enhancing like a wild forest character of an area. Some of the economic impacts in average income in a community that has more wilderness versus less. That's out there. We shouldn't ignore that. We should look at that. And then we should look at the conclusions. When you look at the studies identifying where there have been benefits and where there haven't, the biggest driver is where we have the resources and we are promoting them, protecting them, and managing them, we see real economic benefits. When we have those resources and we're not, and we're pretending we can just ignore them and they'll take care of themselves, we're doing a disservice to future generations in terms of environmental protection, and we're also missing an incredible economic opportunity for the economy of the area, like here in the Adirondack Park. Many would say we need or would benefit from an economic study here in the Adirondacks like we've had in the Catskills, and there would be value to that. But we don't need a study to know what we need to do. We need to work across the park on clean water, view sheds, as was mentioned today, a multi-season, diversified recreational opportunities, wilderness lands, and wild forests. So we have a really broad suite of attractions to get people coming in to the area, expanding the user base. We need to protect the resource as part of the economic strategy. I suggest we need to protect the most fragile of the state lands as wilderness, but we also have more than half of those state lands as wild forest, and we better manage and protect those a lot better. It's great to have a multi-use area, a moose sugar type area out there for people, but if we don't have signs put up for people to find it, we're not really going to see the full economic benefits of the decisions that have been made about how to manage those lands. Protection of the land, the state land, the clean water, and having good conservation development will protect the park and produces the greatest sustainable economic growth potential for the hamlets in Adirondack Park. We need to protect our land, our water, our park, and we need to promote it and manage it better. I've started saying we need to build a better Adirondack Park. And some of my environmental friends using the word build? Yes, we need to build a better Adirondack Park. We have a great park. We have a more than 100-year history. Remember, that history started off talking about both economic interests and environmental interests coming together to protect it. Let's reunite on economic and environmental interests. That gives us a larger room, a larger tent, more people as part of it. We normally have to give and take a little bit without giving on our principles, and we can actually advance some of the changes that would make the park even better for our children. It's great to be back in the Adirondacks after only coming up as a visitor over the last 20 years, and I just want to thank everyone who's been saying welcome home, and I look forward to partnering and working with all of you. But let me just close with a question and answer. Is there an opportunity now to reform the Adirondack Park Agency and the way we do business? Can we improve environmental protection, economic sustainability, and resiliency? And the Adirondack Council and I say yes. If we all work together, we can do it. Thank you.
And thank you. That's a very good message to leave us with. If we all work together, we can do it. And I'm sure we can. And I want to thank you all for coming today and lasting all these many hours. You're wonderful. And now I hope you can all join us and relax at our reception. Wait a minute now. Tom has something to say.
You knew what I was going to say. You wouldn't have given it to me. But I just wanted to ask you to thank and honor Dick for the work he's put in to make this.